Hey friends, it's Heather. I am back with another process video for Butterfly Reflections Inc. I am working on a layout, which, where do I begin? This took quite a bit of time. I was doing a lot of experimenting. So I received these Nuvo glue pens, which you see to activate it, you have to press it down quite a bit, to get the glue flowing. And so I got the large and the medium. There's also a small, I don't know if it's like a ballpoint pen, but a small pen. So I got the large and the medium. And I really wanted to play with these gold flakes from Heidi Swapp. I'm using them in a box that I probably received some goodies in, but I don't remember but you need to work with some sort of container because they tend to fly everywhere and they're very sticky. You can see they're sticking to my hands. So what I started out with was cutting my sentiment from white cardstock. It says, "You are loved." It is from Altenew, and I loved it. And I really wanted to incorporate that as the title of my layout, but I went about this the wrong way. And I'm showing this to you because had I known, I would have done it differently. But I cut it first, and I didn't pop it out because I thought it would be easier to apply the glue and the flakes. But once the glue dried and the flakes were all applied, it was very hard to remove the die from the surrounding cardstock. So, lesson learned. So just so you don't make the same mistake, punch out the die completely and then apply it. And I still like the way that it turns out. You want to use a brush to sort of buff it and remove any excess. But I would definitely punch it out completely and then do it. And I don't actually end up using it for this layout. You'll see I worked up a couple of different options just because I was playing. I got new stuff and I was excited. So you'll see kind of what I ended up with later on. But this is a die set from Pretty Pink Posh. And I also thought it would be fun to create a frame. And I cut the photo first. I'm not sure why I did that. It was kind of silly. I realized after I did it, the photo actually was left with this, the negative portion of the scallop, which I didn't really like. So that's when I cut another piece of cardstock and I'll layer that on top of my photo. So for my background, I started out with a piece of white cardstock and I am applying some Distress Oxide ink. And first I did apply a layer of clear gesso. And I use clear gesso because white gesso never usually matches white cardstock. And you can see the difference once it's dry. So I use clear gesso 95% of the time for that reason. I actually really like the texture of clear gesso also. It always tends to be smoother. I've tried out a few different brands and white gesso usually has like a gritty texture and I'm not sure why that is. And it could just be the brands that I've tried. But again, because I'm working with white cardstock, I usually grab the clear gesso just because I don't really want the difference of color to show. So I just used a piece of plastic packaging to apply my ink and I'm letting that dry. Okay, so here are my options. So that was the gold foil and that is heat embossed with Avery L's Rose Gold, which is what I end up going with. And I heat embossed it twice because if you do it more than once, it will smooth out and it gets a nice dimensional look to it. And I also use those same glue pens on that same die to apply the Nuvo gold glitter, which was also very pretty. But the color of it really didn't go with, the end result of the color scheme. So I did those 3 versions that you just saw. I did go back and I cut that die cut again, and then I applied the gold flakes, and it turned out a lot better. So again, don't make the same mistake that I did. So I'm showing you here a stamp set and coordinating dies from Altenew. I'm sorry, W+9, and a stencil that I plan to use. So here you're seeing me apply gesso again to a new piece of cardstock, because I realized the color of the embossing really did not go well with the bright colors that I had originally put on my background, but no worries, I will definitely be able to use that on another layout. So what I decided to do was apply some ink through that stencil to my background, and so I don't really have the smushed ink look, but I like the subtle look of the hearts through the stencil. And I used a few different inks there, and all the products that I used are in the blog post, which I will link below, so you can see a list of all the different colors that I used. But also I wanted to mention, I used in the beginning the Distress or the Ranger retractable brushes, and I really like those because they give you a softer look. And when you use the blending brush or blending tool, e-blending tool, and a stencil, sometimes when you go in that circular motion, it catches on the stencil, which is a little annoying to me. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but if you haven't tried those brushes, you should definitely give them a try. They come with 2 in a pack, which is nice because you can use one for, cool colors and the other for warm colors. So I don't have one for each color, but I will reuse them for different shades. So I first started out by stamping some of those flowers and embossed them. And again, this was another learning moment for me. I know that stamps and dies are different with most brands. I have used a lot of layering stamps and dies from Altenew, and I love them. And don't get me wrong, I love this set too. I love all the small images that come in this set. They're a lot smaller, and for a scrapbooker, I mean, we have a 12 by 12 page that we need to fill up, so it was a little daunting because these images were so small, but I really like the way that they turned out. But I like all the small images that come in this stamp set, and the dies. There's matching dies for almost every one of these, actually every one of the stamped images, and there's 3 layers for the flowers and 2 layers for the leaves, and then there's these little small detail stamps. So the stamp set is called Pretty Little Peonies. Again, it's from W+9. And then there's also another stamp set called Pretty Peonies that is a very similar stamp set, but the images are larger. So this was my learning experience. I always stamp first and then I cut them, because usually I'm able to line the die up with a stamped image. And also, I am not the best stamper in the world, especially when it comes to layering stamps. I mean, I know what I'm doing, but I haven't done it enough to really call myself an expert. But with these small images, I had the toughest time lining up the die. And I had already stamped a bunch and then planned to cut them out. And then when I realized that I could not line the die up enough to make it straight to my satisfaction. I mean, they don't have to be perfect. And I got most of the image in it, but because there's a white line around the stamped image, the border was uneven, and so it was kind of bugging me. So I decided that it was best to just die cut a bunch of them and then go back and stamp them, which is what I'm doing now. Now, for me, the best way when you're doing mass production is to use a stamping tool like the Misty, which is what I would have done if I had been able to, like when I started to stamp them, I would have stamped them all and then die cut them. But then I had to go, obviously that method didn't work. And it was just because the shape was kind of similar. There wasn't really defining like detail that I could line it up. Does that make sense? So again, this die set, stamp set was just different than the ones that I'm used to. So I switched it up, and there's nothing wrong with either way. You can stamp first and die cut first. And ironically, I actually watched a video Paige Evans did recently where she stamped first and then die cut it. And I made a comment because I thought it was different than what I had normally seen and what I had done. But yeah, I had to switch it up and do it that way too this time. So there I'm just showing you all the flowers, and I do have a bunch of leaves. And my camera, the battery was dying. So you missed a portion of what I did, but I just splattered some ink on the background in matching colors. And because I knew I wanted to scatter these flowers around, and then I was going to my photo, my sentiment, I felt like there needed to be something to ground the layout, if that makes sense. I needed a border or something. So what I did was you can see the top and the bottom. There's an area where I tore the white cardstock and folded it back and ruffled the edges, and then I stapled part of it down, and then I tucked in a piece of pattern paper that actually came from the 6x6 paper pad, Paige Evans, I believe it's Take Me Away. And then I tucked some of those flowers in there. So now you can see all my flowers are placed, and I apologize that the portion of the layout is off screen, but you'll see the close-ups here shortly. But I just scattered them around my photo and up at the top of the layout. I have glued down my sentiment. I did pop up some of the flowers on pop dots just to give a little bit of dimension. And now I am scattering some sequins from Pretty Pink Posh around my page, just tucking them in, randomly. And I'm using my tweezers and some Ranger Multimedia matte glue to stick them down. And that is it. It was kind of a time-consuming layout for me just because of all the stamping and the die cutting, but I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. If you have any questions about my process or the products I use, please feel free to leave me a comment, contact me. But head over to the store and check out these products, and the blog. You can get more details on what I used. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.